It is time to check in with Amanda Lang, host of Taking Stock, which of course airs Friday nights at 6 o'clock on BNN Bloomberg and across the iHeart Radio network. Amanda, I thought we'd start today south of the border where big numbers came up in terms of GDP, and any idea that we were going to head into a recession, at least south of the border, seems to have gone out the window, despite the fact there were a lot of people, smart people, saying this was going to happen. Things are as well there, I think, as everyone could have imagined. So what's going on?
It is quite something. That economy is surprising many. And it is, this, of course, creates some issues for the central bank down there, which is like ours, trying to stifle inflation. An economy that's picking up at 3.3%, which is what theirs did at the end of last year, means that their inflation fight might be harder than ours, believe it or not. You actually do want to see a bit more slowdown. But honestly, it's because consumers there are still spending. Their spending expanded at 2.8% annually. They're buying everything, clothing, furniture, recreational vehicles. That's not the story here. So before we say, oh, well, maybe we're not going to be doing so badly, it won't be true here. We definitely are seeing spending patterns here that show that households are worried about rates, that we're already feeling a kind of a crimp in our ability to spend. So a very different story, but it's good news for us, right? They buy a lot of our products. So if their economy is doing well, it can't be bad for Canada.
Yeah, plus we had Tiff Macklin come out, and you're right. We can't necessarily draw parallels here, and that's a good thing, I guess, in this case. We don't want to see spending kind of get out of control, if you will. But did you get the sense from Tiff Macklin during this week when he left the bank rate at 5% that we're likely to start seeing those cuts that everyone has been hoping for sooner rather than later?
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
I would not say sooner rather than later. And Interestingly, I think Tiff primed this meeting and decision perfectly with his end-of-year remarks. I mean, at the end of last year, he said, we're doing pretty well. We're feeling pretty good. Remember, he was feeling pretty confident that they were on the right track and that inflation was doing what they thought it should be doing. But he was cautious. He's like, this is going to be bumpy. And he all but signaled, look for a spike higher in inflation. It's not, this last mile is the longest for this fight. And as we saw, inflation did pop up a little bit. So what I heard from him was, okay, probably higher rates are off the table, but how long do we hold here? And that's been, we've been talking about that. How long do we hold at 5% is now the story. The market is still looking for the beginning of cuts starting as soon as April, some people see. Most people agree there will be a cut of some kind by year end. But I would say, what I heard the Bank of Canada say this week is don't rush at it, and that we think inflation's back at target in 2025. So what does that suggest? To me, that suggests rates will be back at maybe 3.5% or 4% by 2025.
Okay, so to your huff and puff, Natasha, about you want to wait. What's the advice, Amanda, to someone like in Natasha's case, if you're dealing with a mortgage now, given what the bank is kind of telegraphing? What do you do?
In other words, if you're renewing right now, what do you do?
Yeah, you lock into it. Do you hope that rates will go down, lock into a variable, or do you say, hey, you know what? I'd like to keep it where it is right here and lock into a fixed?
My answer to that is yes. It is.
Amanda doesn't like to give specific advice.
No, it's highly dependent on the individual. And I've always felt, regardless of what kind of part of the cycle we're in, it really does, in some ways, fixed versus variable comes down to your personality and your cash flow. Do you have the cushion to deal with it if you're wrong and you go variable and it doesn't go the way you hope?
Okay.
But yeah, I think you can probably say variable. You could tilt towards variable now in a way that you might not have done 6 months ago. I will allow for that.
Fair enough.
Okay.
By the end of a 5-year mortgage, the chances are very good that it's below 5%. So then you probably want to be variable.
Okay.
The banks don't like that one bit, though. They make it totally painful to take variable. But let's move on to trade talks, or maybe they should be called cheese talks with the UK. And they're not going well at all. In fact, the UK walked away. So what's the real issue here, Amanda?
So the real issue is Canada is playing hardball with protecting our dairy industry. And in fact, many Canadians may not know this, but we're passing a law, and I was actually trying to figure out today if it's already in law or not, but it definitely was speeding through the Senate a couple of months ago. So if it hasn't passed into royal assent, it will soon. A law that would make it illegal to negotiate against the dairy industry. So what you're hearing from the UK negotiators is, why are we at the table if you are taking a big chunk of our market off the table? And by the way, we're going to hear that from NAFTA negotiators or USMCA negotiators when they come back. We are hamstringing ourselves against any future trade deals because we've introduced this weird thing that makes our negotiators totally bound to protecting our dairy industry. And by the way, we have an agreement with the Europeans called CETA that allows for the certain number of import of cheese. And it's not cheese we get here. It's cheese we don't get here. So Canadians, give us our cheese. The UK left the EU, so now we need a new deal with them. I don't know why we didn't just say, here's the European deal, let's just mirror it. But we didn't. And then we threw this whole wrinkle in that protects dairy farmers. Now, you guys are, Quebec is the home to many of them, and they're politically powerful. So we know why this happens. But I just have to say, economically, to protect one tiny, relatively wealthy group of business owners and hurt all of the other businesses in the country is an odd decision.
Who knew the dairy lobby? I mean, we knew there was a serious dairy lobby, but now it's international, and it's clearly, as you're suggesting, this ends up just basically hurting us at the end, doesn't it?
It does. Free trade is better. Free trade is better trade. Lower prices is better. I mean, ask yourselves. We've been talking a lot about how the grocers are in the spotlight for high prices, high profit. Their profit margins, 2-3%, are attracting attention. Dairy farmers are among the wealthiest businesses on a profitability basis. Their profit is protected. And so then we say, okay, why do we care about that? We can debate it. Do we want family farms? Fine. But do we want cheaper milk and cheese? Would consumers be better off with cheaper milk and cheese? And that's the conversation we should be having. And for some reason, our government, and this crosses all political parties, they all protect the cheesemakers.
Wow.
They say, nope, we're going to protect this group. And honestly, it does go to the power of Quebec in federal politics, I think, because that's where a lot of these folks are.
I mean, Amanda, I've always liked you, but now I'm positively smitten when you said, give us our cheese.
I thought,
there.
Because you love your cheese? That's okay. Can I just touch on one?
Especially the smelly French cheese. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the stuff
Exactly.
you want.
Can't believe we're having this discussion.
So important.
I thought we'd move from that on to the list of Canada's best employers. I know this comes out every year. I know Quebec's in there at least a couple of times, once at Hydro, once at Concordia University. End of the day, do governments look at this and say we should be doing a better job, or look at the great job we are doing?
I mean, I think the real win on this list, this is the Forbes list of top 100 employers in Canada, and in the top 20, you can count only 3 private companies. They're otherwise all hospitals, government, or government agencies. And I would say that what those have in common are unions. So it's the unions who should look at this list and say, we're doing a great job. And the private sector that should look at it and say, where are we? Hydro-Quebec is on here. I don't know if you're going to count that. The most interesting one to me is, number one is the Hershey Company, which I think is interesting, but it's not really, it has Canadian operations, so it's going to count, but it's not a Canadian company per se. Yeah. The Keg is number 13 on this list. Yeah. And for a service business to jump onto this list, I think is pretty good. So they're doing something good at the Keg, and maybe other places should look at what it is.
Okay, so the takeaway from our conversation today is chocolate and cheese, very important industries in Canada.
Don't touch it. Listen, you're talking to two women. Go. Chocolate and
Understood.
cheese, very important.
And we'll leave it at that. Amanda Lang, thank you. Always appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too.